Bonjour, pigeon. It's Mimi again, keeping it real international for the beginning of my second tour of market garden podcasting. And today we are going to listen to a conversation I had with my dear friend, Charles Arnoux-Lachaux from Burgundy. We had this conversation last year after vintage. Actually, it was early in 2023. And we caught up on the 22 harvest. So this will not cover the 2023 harvest, which I have heard is a historic one in Burgundy. So we'll have to check back in with Charles. But Charles Arnoux-Lachaux is, as I said, a friend, but also the 6th generation vigneron at Domaine Arnoux-Lachaux in Burgundy and Domaine de la Romani Conti. And if you are a person who drinks, appreciates, thinks about wine, Burgundy is certainly known to you. And these are wines that have a long history, but in the recent past, since Charles's return, have really gained some pretty astonishing critical acclaim. One of the things that is really setting Charles apart in the region is his conversion to regenerative practices. And that is actually how Charles and I came to know each other. We started speaking, I think it was in 2018, when he was going no-till, and he wanted to ask me some questions, and we formed a bond, being the weird pariahs in our respective wine communities for doing things that from the outside seem very heretical to the traditions, especially the cultural traditions related to viticulture. So this is especially true in France. If you've never visited the region of Burgundy, you won't know this, but if you have, you've probably seen there's a lot of very tight regulations around viticulture in France. And some of those determine how you are allowed to trellis and what your plant density can be and all of those things, which cultivars you can use, which varieties you can use and call them certain things. And so the traditions in Burgundy are very strong. And so it makes a big impact when somebody breaks tradition and starts doing things a little bit differently. But for Charles, this has actually led to some pretty significant increase in the cult appeal of the wines, and they are very hard to get your hands on, but they are worth seeking out. I have had the much appreciated luxury of getting to taste some of these in some professional tastings. I have never been able to find or afford the wines myself, but they are extraordinary. If you ever want to really blow somebody's mind, I would definitely recommend you seek them out. Good luck finding them. But I really enjoyed speaking with Charles after it's been a minute, and catch up with how he's doing and how things are coming along in Burgundy. I think it's going to be a very interesting journey as he moves forward. And I think that the critical acclaim is certainly going to help. But also, once people have seen something working, it becomes very difficult to continue to throw it under the bus. And so, of course, I wish Charles all the best, and I hope that you enjoy this conversation.
Today's episode of the No-Till Market Garden Podcast is brought to you by BCS America. BCS two-wheel tractors are designed and built in Italy, where small-scale farming has been a way of life for generations. Discover the beauty of BCS on your farm with PTO-driven implements for soil working, shredding cover crops, spreading compost, mowing under fences, clearing snow, and much more, all powered by a single gear-driven machine that's tailored to the size and scale of your operation. We have been using a BCS tractor on our farm since 2014, and it has saved the day and leveled the workload more times than I can count. And I find new ways to employ it every single season. To learn more, view sale pricing, or locate your nearest dealer, visit bcsamerica.com. That's bcsamerica.com. To learn more, view sale pricing, or locate your nearest dealer, visit bcsamerica.com. That's bcsamerica.com. And while you're there, select tractors and attachments on sale through the end of this year. Today's episode is also brought to you by Certified Naturally Grown. Hey, sustainability nerds, if you run your farm with a high value on soil health, input reduction, and environmental impact, chances are you've thought about certification. Certified Naturally Grown is a farmer-to-farmer certification that demonstrates your commitment to ecological methods while keeping costs low and paperwork to a minimum, meaning you have more time to do the work you really love. This peer review model supports regional knowledge exchange and strengthens local farming networks. See why hundreds of farmers are choosing CNG. Find out more and apply at naturallygrown.org. That's naturallygrown.org. All right, enjoy the show.
Hi, Charles. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to see you again.
Pleasure to be on air with you.
We're really excited to have you. I appreciate you making the time. I know it's evening there. Can you catch me up a little bit? How was your vintage? How was harvest?
It went pretty well, despite all the heat wave which struck the world this summer, it seemed. I think now what we have started to apply since a few years, pruning, the trimming, and the regenerative farming are helping us a lot. We are reaching our target this year in terms of size of crop. The quality is amazing. We don't saw so much the lack of water. In terms of results, as balance of the grapes, the shape of the vineyard, the way they look, the color of the leaves. So we're really looking forward to it, and maybe it can be an answer to what is happening globally nowadays. So we'll see.
Yeah. Tell us, just for the listeners who aren't familiar with you and your work, tell us where you are and, where your crews are and how many hectare you farm.
So it's a family estate. It's called Domaine Arnoux-Lachaux. I'm the 6th generation working on it. I work alongside my mother, who's running all the administrative aspects. We are based in Burgundy, in France, in the village of Bonjour, which is a small village, about 260 hectares. And we run a property of 14 hectares of vineyard, producing 98% of red wine, of Pinot Noir. And we have appellations going from some Bourgogne levels to villages, Premier Cru, and a few Grand Crus. So it's a very traditional Burgundy domain.
Yes. And you have been back at the domain for how long?
I got back full-time at the domain in October 2011 after a few internships in France and abroad. And I was working alongside my father, who was in charge of all the technical aspects. And he left the domain in 19. So I'm fully in charge of all the techniques since 19, but he let me that space really from 15. So we started to change stuff, technically speaking, from 14.
And your mother's still involved with administrative piece.
And even more with what we have changed, the look of the customers, the people at were farming at our wines have changed. So it's like a rebirth professionally as well for her. The work has maybe never been as much interesting. And the interest for wine from the people around the globe has been increasing since ever. So it's a good time.
Yes. And you must enjoy working together. It must work out pretty well.
Yeah, it does. I do have a look on the allocation she does and stuff. We talk about it, but we really trust each other, and it's really work hand in hand. And with our team, we have 5 people working with us all year long. So everything's going pretty smoothly at the moment. So it's quite nice.
That's really great. Can you give me a little bit about the history of the domain? I mean, you've spoken about your transition to your generation, which is the 6th. Can you fill us in on the history of the domain and some of the changes that it's gone through?
So we established since 1858. So all the practices were quite normal. And under the era of my grandfather, Robert Arnoux, which was born and worked for the post-war when the people started to see the use of fertilizer, herbicides, and so we were like many agricultural people around the globe. We followed this trend, which was making our life way more easier and helped the yields. And it was at the time where my grandparents, my grandfather and my grandmother, they extended the domain as well. We got more and more holdings. They bought a few vineyards. So when they started to work on it, I think we were about 7 hectares big. And they brought about 3-4 hectares. My parents brought about 3 hectares together, which they purchased while they were working. And when I joined, I started to get concerned about the way we were working in the vineyard. My father, from 99, went a lot to work with grass. So he seeded grass in the middle of the row, but we were still working, plowing below the row. And we were mowing the grass in the middle of the row. So we were not close to regenerative, but we had a lot of grass in our vineyards. And the treatments were not organic, but in a close way to organic. And when I came back, quickly after we moved to organic. And then we removed this seeded grass to try to have a different management of the soil. And I started to move to regenerative in 2019 on a third of the domain. Yeah. And from 2020, we moved 100%.
Let's talk about that transition, because you speak about how you had concerns about the management in the vineyard, and what do you think it was about either your background or just who you are as a person that made you feel like you wanted to move in a different direction?
It's not so much about my background. I mean, there is a bit because it's maybe in the education, in the way you think, but my background was working this way. It's more about people I've met and made me more concerned about this. It's friends from school, friends and colleagues I met from here. And I started to look at not just, we do that because we used to, but why do we do this and do that? And I realized there are many things we were doing, like many other agricultural, that sometimes doesn't make sense. For example, the grass we were mowing was very competitive. It was regra. Mm-hmm. So to balance that, we had to bring more nitrogen. So you have grass to try to manage your vigor, but on the other hand, it makes your vineyards weak. So you have to compensate by bringing nitrogen. I was like, this doesn't make sense. We have to find another way. That's why I decided in 2016 to remove that old grass. And after I tried to move in the way of working where I didn't care about organic, biodynamic, sustainable, or whatever, I wanted to work in a way that makes sense, logically speaking, even more when you go deep technically, and a way of working with which you feel comfortable with when you get back home and when you wake up in the mornings to get to the field, a way of farming that made us happy. And that's how we started to move towards that direction.
And was it challenging to convince either your family or the people around you that this was a good transition? We've spoken about this and how hard it can be to be one of the first people to adopt new practices, especially in such a traditional region.
It wasn't challenging with the family because with all the changes, they let me. I've been very lucky with our region. I was able very young to be able to input major changes when some people have to wait to be almost in their 50s to change a small thing at the domain. So my family always trusted those changes and they went well. So when we moved towards that direction, they were just the same way. Okay, you have a feeling, go for it. The hardest part was more around where we live, it's not usual. Since 2 or 3 years now, regenerative farming is more a thing, but don't see a lot of people having non-seeded grass in the vineyards like we do, and most of them plow because for the people who are listening to have in mind, in Burgundy we have 10,000 vines per hectare, so the vines are already quite competitive. So there was no feedback because nobody has practiced that in our region with this kind of density, with the no trimming. And so we were really the first one to start. So the hardest part was to just jump from the cliff and see where we would go, where we would land. And there were one or two scary moments, but I've been very much supported by my family. I have an extraordinary team at the Domaine and some foreign people like Luca Arwagna in Piedmont, who has been doing that since more than 30 years, who give me great advices, and a great Oregon winemaker called Mimi Castile, who I've been in touch a few times to help me manage to get through this. So this was very, very helpful.
That's great. I think having the support of your family is so critical because you are under a lot of scrutiny. People are looking at you all the time. It's similar here, but I think things are much closer together in Burgundy, and they're so tied to tradition that I have felt a lot of sympathy for you during this time because I know that it can be really hard when people are looking at you and saying things about how you're going to crash your vineyard or whatever they want to say, and having that support makes all the difference in the world, I think, because we all go home and question ourselves, even when we feel so strongly about our convictions. I think it can be really difficult when people are challenging you constantly. And the good news for you is that it looks like now, at least from the outside, that people are really starting to pay attention because the wines speak for themselves. And I wanted to ask a little bit about, have you changed the winemaking as well? As taking over the Domaine, have you also changed the winemaking approach?
Yes, a lot. And you're right. Without the family, I think this wouldn't be impossible. But because even if you have a very close friend who are supporting you, you don't spend your life with them. And if you have the support of the family, you can go through a lot of things. And I'm lucky, my parents supported me, my wife, and I have my kids. So it was a big thing at this time. And yeah, as you said, a lot of things have changed. Our wines got more recognition, so now the people start to pay attention. But now it's more one way or the other. It's the people have an opinion, even if they know us, the wines or not. They have an opinion because what we do is controversial. It's not usual, and it's what is fun about it as well. And it's not just about regenerative. What we are trying to do at the Domaine is to have a global picture. The way we plant the vine until the way we sell a bottle, we try to have the same philosophy. So we have changed everything in the cellar as well. So we aim for a small crop. So we prune short. We prune in a goblet style, a no-made one. To have a small crop, we target 25 hectoliters per hectare. Generally, we're more at 15, 20. This year, 2022, we are close. We are 23. So we say we reached our target.
That's so great.
Yet, but very close to. So we've adapted ourselves. Now we do 100% all cluster. And we do almost nothing now in winemaking because the vineyards are looking much and much better from year to year. And now we just put the grapes into tank like they are into the tanks, 100% all cluster, a very old school approach to not touch them. And they remain in tank for between 6 days and a half to maximum 10 days. We do just a few pump overs, 1, maximum 2 punch down done by feet. And then they go down to the cellar for a bit more than 2 years. And from this year, we moved to ceramic vessel made from a sandstone because I don't want anymore oak taint or taste. Mm-hmm. I want the wines to be the pure expression of the vintage and the plots, because almost all the wines we produce as parcellaire and lieu-dit wines, they come from single vineyards. Mm-hmm. And for me, with Regenerative, we will enhance the difference of each plot. And I want those neutral vessels to keep enhancing the differences and have something really, pure. It's really inspired by kind of Japanese way of cooking or of conceiving the the way it happens, because our winery are like big kitchens, these big pots where we put our grapes. So now we are lucky to be able to have a certain quality of grapes. So the aim is really to do the less we can once the grapes are here, and do the maximum in the vineyard.
That's amazing. And have you, just to clarify, do your wines spend no time in oak at all?
No more.
Okay. Wow. That's a big change. I mean, that is that's very big change, especially in Burgundy. And I mean, I wish it were easier to get your wines because so much has been changing, and I'm just so excited for you, because I agree with you that the changes that we can make in the vineyards really allow us to hear the strongest voice of these places that are so special. And, adding a lot of ingredients in the kitchen, through oak intervention or cute winemaking techniques, I think really kind of sits on top of that very strong voice. And so I applaud you for going so boldly into the cellar and so they'll élevage for 2 years and then they get released right away, or do you?
They will go to Bordeaux, and we keep the wines for 1 year after bottling. And I don't know how it will go. I want to even do longer advice, maybe 3 years, and keep wines in Bordeaux maybe 2 or 3 years before to release them. But we produce solid oil, and we have invested so much to work this way. And at the moment, we just need now to keep it rolling for 1 year or 2.
Yeah.
And then we'll see if we can move towards that direction. Because with the volumes we target now, we produce a quarter of what my parents were producing on the same tool.
Yeah.
And we've not the same way of working and of investment at all. So we need to make it roll now to be able to move forward, to keep moving forward.
Yes. It's a strong, I mean, it's a very intense transition, and yet you've managed to come up with a way of getting there step by step. Has it been, what would you say in both the vineyard and the winery, what have been the biggest challenges for you in terms of making the transition to both regenerative agriculture, but then also the things that you've had to change in the winery? Have you encountered any issues in making these transitions?
Not really, because most of those things are techniques from the past. Mm-hmm. We know they work, but you have to be ready to give it what it takes in terms of time, in terms of money, investment, because very often it's very cost effective. And you have to go 100%, because if you don't, it doesn't work. So, and I wasn't so scared, because if we would fail, it's easy to come back to what most of the overgrowers are doing, because it does work. People seem to be happy with it on the market. So I prefer to go try and fail and reconsider than the opposite. Yeah. That's more my mindset. I have an extraordinary tool here. I'm young, and my team has become pretty young now. So let's have some fun. Let's try something, and we'll see where it will take us. And so far, we're quite happy, and we are still having a lot of fun.
That's great. What would you say has been the biggest, the most noticeable difference in the vineyard since you've changed your practices? I know you've had some very challenging years in terms of both drought and frost. And so what would you say you've noticed the most in terms of what the new practices have changed in terms of how you either get through those hard times, or, what struggles the vines have had to go through to adapt to this new methodology?
Biggest change we observe with the team is that the vineyards are a way better resilience and self-resistance, and we see it with the way we spray. And also we spray organic, and we practice biodynamic as well. 21 was a very tough year in Burgundy because we frosted a lot, and after the growing season was very humid. So the vegetable was fragile because of the frost, and a lot of people sprayed a lot in terms of frequency, and with strong use of sulfur and copper. And even from that vintage, we used what other biodynamics used in the village. We sprayed 6 times when the other biodynamics sprayed between 10 and 12. And at the end, we use 1 kilogram, 300 grams of copper per hectare, when the other organics were more in kilograms, and some even asked for derogation to be above the legal target to keep their crop. And our vineyard seems really healthy. So I think it's the biggest change. We've changed so much in the vineyard. The way of pruning, of spraying. The high pillars now, our pillars are 1.60 meters. Some branches are reaching almost 4 meters long. So it's hard to say it's only the regenerative or the pruning or the nurturing, but all that together, our vines, they don't struggle so much anymore. In humid climates like 21, they didn't get so flooded, so they were not so fragile. This year, with the drought, there was a big pressure of oidium. They rested better. We were able even to spray less. We are under the kilogram of copper. That's the biggest change for us. We're able to spray less and less and to use less and less of the chemicals which we can use in organic. Because people don't want to use the word chemical anymore in organic, but it remains what we use at the end of the day.
Yeah. We still have to spray. It's a very sensitive species to two very difficult strains of mildew. So it's people don't talk about how often organic vineyards end up spraying, and it's amazing that you've been able to cut down. I don't use copper here in the U.S. We don't have the same issue with downy mildew that you do, but I know that it's a big component of the organic sprays in Burgundy because of downy mildew, and to be able to cut so much out of your program is a really big deal, I think, because copper's tough. It's hard. It's hard on the environment. So that's
the people from the certification organism who was visiting every year. They were not trusting it. They were like, "No, I've seen all your colleagues around. It's not possible if you use Solidol. There might be a mistake." And I gave them all the bills, and we counted. I was like, "This is what we bought. This is what we used." And they were like, "Oh, can we see the vineyard?" I was like, "Yeah, of course. Let's go." They were like, "No, it's incredible." So it shows the global shame works. Maybe we cannot say it's one thing more than another. And another thing, we use tractors only for spraying now. With our farming, we don't use tractors anymore. And we have been getting further in the regenerative since 3 years now. We have sheep in the vineyards as well.
Yeah.
During winter time.
That's
to really
great.
go more into the farming way than just viticulture. To get back to what our grandparents were doing when they were having farms more than just vineyard estates.
Yeah.
Today's episode is brought to you by Rimmel Greenhouses.
Whether it's tomatoes to market, flowers in the spring, or your family's harvest, growing in a greenhouse protected from the weather provides the right environment that you need for a harvest that you can count on. Rimmel Greenhouses are designed for durability and offer the quality that you need to grow productively year-round. Visit rimmelgreenhouses.com to get a quote today.
If I may editorialize for a second, I own a Rimmel tunnel. I love it. We built it ourselves, and I really appreciated the quality of the tunnel as well as the customer service we received in the process. So make sure to check them out. Today's episode is also brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud sponsor of the No-Till Market Garden podcast. Since 1973, Johnny's has supported farmers and gardeners with superior seeds, tools, and information to help ensure their growing success and help feed their communities and families. The research farm is at the heart of Johnny's, where they trial thousands of varieties and tools every year. Their breeding program uniquely focuses on introducing varieties that meet the needs or solve the challenges mixed market, small farmers, and avid gardeners face. Visit johnnyseeds.com for innovative new varieties and time-tested favorites to grow this season. You can also browse their online growers library, link in the description, for a wealth of free educational resources. The employee owners at Johnny's look forward to growing with you. All right, back to the show.
Well, it's incredible that you've been able to see these changes in such a short period of time. And I think it should give people courage to take that on. And now that you have been enjoying so much success and so much attention in the global wine community, your wines are highly coveted and sell out very quickly. So have you noticed people around you, other vignerons, adopting these techniques, or are people still very skeptical?
There's an in-between. We see more and more vineyards here starting to change a bit, or vignerons trying high palissage or regenerative in one vineyard. But the people are scared to go global because it's a big investment. And to be honest, what we target in terms of yield, not everybody can afford to do so, because then you have to have certain prices of sale. And you need to have the wines in front and to be ready to go this way. So it's really not just about farming, it's about the totality. So I understand why not so many people are moving this way. There will be more and more, because people will try one vineyard or two, they will see it works. And I don't mean they have to do the no trimming and the low crop we do. For me, it's another philosophy. But even an in-between would be interesting. But we see more and more people starting to try to visit, to understand why, to meet, or walking around the vineyards on the weekends. So it's moving slowly, but it's moving.
Yeah. I always think, when people start calling and asking if they can come and visit, that's when people are really starting to pay attention. It takes a long time. Like you say, it's a stressful transition, and it's a costly transition, or at least it can be, depending on, where you start. I wish could you speak a little bit about, I think a lot of our listeners won't be familiar with the regulations in Burgundy around, things that you can't change in terms of the varieties that you work with, or the trellis system, the trellis style. Can you talk a little bit about that? And I would love to hear you, sort of express your thoughts on what you think might make it easier for people to make that transition if some of those rules were to change.
Yeah. So we have only two varietals in Burgundy. We have Pinot Noir, and let's say for the two main, we have Pinot Noir and Chardonnay, and we have a bit of Aligoté and of Gamay as well. And so it's two varietals, even more the Pinot Noir, which is very sensitive to disease. And then our plantation is 10,000 vines per hectare, and you cannot go below 8,000. And actually, it's depending on each village. Sometimes it's slightly higher, but it's the basic, it's 8,000. And so it's becoming complicated, because to do the regenerative, even if you seed grass, to pass the Rollefaca or Lensem, those tools, you need to have to be able to have tractors in the vineyards. And when you work the way we do, with tall pillars, high density, there's almost no tractors on the market to do that, unless you want a tractor which will have a total weight of 10,000 kilograms, which after, like we said at the beginning, doesn't make sense. You try to not compact, to have grass, a lot of species, diversity, and you will spray or you will pinch the grass with a tractor that ruins everything. And that's why it's becoming harder. It would be easier if we could have, let's say, 4,000 vines per hectare, but then would it has the same quality, because the crop wouldn't be the same. It would be more easy to work towards this way if we wouldn't be forced to have such high density. But the trellising, there is a minimum of 8. There is not a maximum. The problem of the 8 we use at the Domaine is that then you do everything by hand. So you need to have the motivated people on the journey with you, and you need to be able to costly to pay all those people, bring all the tools, and mentally it's a lot of tailor-made, it's bespoke way of working, and to have bespoke tools. So you have to find your way, and it's harder because a lot of people like to have some advice, people guide them, tell them, you want to do this, do it this way. When you work this way, in our case, you cannot trust anything. You have to follow your instincts. And
yeah, it's scary sometimes, I think, to trust yourself so much. And are there groups of growers there who, share ideas and talk about equipment and things that they've tried in the vineyard?
There are more and more. I was in a few of those groups and I've left because what we do here in the way of doing it with 100% grass over the row and everywhere, there's nobody doing it this way. So at the end, there's nobody who's supportive. There's not a group which is supportive enough because we are too far away from how others would like to even approach it. So I've tried, but at the end of the day, it's too different and maybe a bit too extreme.
Mm-hmm.
I hope it will inspire some people to try to work differently. But yeah, I moved out from all those groups and everything. It's done. But I try to get ideas instead of group. It's by meeting friends abroad, elsewhere in France or in Italy, or I have to go to America as well to see how people are behaving themselves, how they do it their way. Yeah. But the problem of those groups, you always wait somebody to lead or something to follow. When there we alone. So
it is. I mean, I think that is a big barrier to people adopting practices is just that lack of places for people to come together and be, I guess, creative and curious about what, not just what you're doing, but what they could do on their own. And it is, I remember so vividly when I started doing things the way that I was doing them. I would go to grower meetings, and I mean, I felt like such an outsider because people just thought that I was out of my mind. But I think that in that respect as well, it's just so good that your family is so supportive of you, because it can be really challenging just to be isolated like that from your community.
But yeah, I felt like you in those kind of groups, an outsider, and there are things that can be taught as experimental, and you want to say, "Yeah, I'm trying that since 4 or 5 years, and it seems to work." But if you go in front and say it, you are considered as the fool as well. So you're on your side. So those groups, they bring you some stuff at the very beginning, and after, if you're too much an outsider, you become a marginal a bit as well. So
yeah, and you only have so much time and a lot of work to do. So, what have you observed in the vineyard? Specific changes to the soil since you've been? I know you started and you brought sheep in after you had kind of gotten your feet underneath you. Are you still using the roller crimper, or are you using just the sheep now?
The sheep only in winter time. From now, we put them in the vineyards a few days after harvest until the buds, the tubs, when the sap starts to flow. Yeah. Because there they leak the tubs and they remove the buds. So we've experimented that already. And the rest, I have a roll and stem, so it's something to try to bend the grass, to pinch it. And this year we've used it once, because as we do not seed the grass, it doesn't grow tall enough for the tools to work their way. We use it as we can, but for the moment it seems to regulate itself pretty well. What we observed, I think the sheeps play big importance there, is the quantity of worms in the soil. When we do holes after harvest to remove the dead vines, there's too much worms, and a lot of around the roots now we have more and more mycorrhizae everywhere.
Oh, that's great.
And so much insects, spiders, many things, and even big animals, mice, birds. So what is interesting to me, I think, is the balance this cover of the soil recreates in terms of humidity and all this alimentary chain from the insects, the mice, the birds, who's hitting home, living there, pouring, having their life, they bring more diversity back. And I think it helps a lot the vineyards, helps them fight against the disease. I think the fungus of oidium and mildew have less space to grow because there's plenty of other fungus, even if it's not very old. And one thing we do more now is we let all the wood from pruning on the soil as well. We don't burn it anymore and we don't crush it. We just cut it in small pieces of 15, 20 centimeters and we leave it there to decompose fully, create compost and attract. It makes carbon into the soil, retains humidity, and you know all the stories. So
and the fungi, the mycorrhizal fungi, they love wood. So leaving that in the vineyard, it's always sort of baffled me that the burning, because leaving that wood on the ground is such a valuable source of food for the mycorrhizal fungi that I think that's really great. And it doesn't really take that much more time to cut your prunings into smaller pieces. It makes it easier, actually, I think, to move around.
It does for us with the no trimming because the branches are so long.
Exactly. Getting them out of the wires.
So it takes a bit of time. But what we win at the end, I think it's all about a question of balance. And I really believe it changes a lot to do it this way. And you hear the big argument everywhere. I still burn because I want to remove the wood disease. Like escab, like dead arm, and everything. I can understand that if you leave them on the floor, it's like when you disinfect the surface, the worst bacteria come first. But when you let some time happen, you have balance. It's just the people are scared to be able to fill the gap between the beginning and the balance. And it's pretty scary, but we don't see problem of wood disease. And I think with all those fungus and bacteria, they will take over the wood disease as well. We'll have a better balance about that.
Yeah. Just having a healthy ecosystem, when you start to notice all of those creatures and the microorganisms and you just notice even the sound of a place change with the recovery of habitat, I think we underappreciate how much that builds competition against the bad things that we do have to deal with. I mean, I've actually, seen wood disease retreat from a vineyard when you give it enough time to come back into balance. And I think a lot of that is just the different strains of microorganisms that are coming back into the soil and making their way into, the ecosystem of the vine as well. So yes, it is scary, but I think that, like you say, the reward is worth the wait and the patience and the commitment.
We would all have examples of one or two people in each village farming this way still. We would not be as scared. As you said, when you're in the vineyard, to have all those sounds about the species, the leaves moving. When you go to another vineyard, which is trimmed and plowed, you don't have them. But when you're not used to it, you don't. It's like many things like at home or whatever. When there's something you've never or not experienced since a very long time, you don't know you miss it. It's when you experience it again, you realize how much you missed it. And my team would never go back. And when someone is leaving the domain, they're like, I cannot work in Burgundy anymore because if I still work in the vineyards, I need to work this way. So I have to change of region or of country to be able to. There's no way back in this way of farming. It's impossible.
Yeah,
and it's way of living.
Yeah, it's very sad. Do you think what do you see happening in the next 20, 30 years in Burgundy? What changes do you think are going to happen?
I hope we have just enough rain from time to time so the vines don't struggle so much. And then the people will move towards that direction. As it's a region which earns money at the moment, we can be, an example. And we should be. And more people are realizing that and trying to adapt to move towards more organic way of farming, bring more greenness, planting trees, trying to have some grass there and there. But it's changing a lot.
Yeah.
I hope the next 20 years will be about that, about Burgundy becoming it's iconic nowadays for the wines. but not for the farming.
Mm-hmm.
My hope would be from those to match, to
Yeah.
stay iconic, but because we have an example way of farming.
Yeah. Do you think that so the transition from one generation to the next in Burgundy is very specific, the inheritance? Can you talk a little bit about that and what what you're thinking about in terms of your own family and your own children for the transition to the next generation? Are you thinking about that, or is it too soon?
Not yet, because it's too soon. But as we live on the farm, the kids, even if they're young, they're very, very interested. They have to go see the sheep. On weekends, we walk in the vineyards. They see the grass. And even when we walk around, my daughter, who's now 5, is like, why do you have so much grass? And why do you have the sheep? And we don't see anywhere why there is mud there. Why isn't it pretty? That's the first question. Why isn't it pretty, the vineyards? So I don't know if she will work and if her brother will work in our industry later. But I just hope to keep it going. So even if they don't, they will have a different perception of all that and of life and balance.
Yes, I think it's so wonderful to be raising children who see the beauty in a fully realized ecosystem instead of, at least when I was growing up, I'm sure the same was true for you. The aesthetic of a vineyard was very much about the plowed soil and the perfect, trimmed vines and all of that. And yeah, it's a totally different way of seeing and understanding what is beautiful, and being able to appreciate that from such a young age, I think is, it's going to mean a lot for our vineyards in the future if our children do decide to take over.
But I think it changes a lot the way you work. I think I've started to work even more differently when my wife got pregnant and when we got our daughter, because you feel like you have a different responsibility. I think I would be in the same position today with no kid. Maybe I wouldn't have moved so strongly towards this way of farming, because you would be more selfish. You have nobody to worry for after.
Yeah.
To be like, I don't know. Maybe I think it has changed a lot in the way of taking the decisions as well.
Yeah. I think whether or not people have children is totally up to them. But one thing I can say without hesitation is that children give you a sense of urgency and a care for the future that you've never experienced before. And that is, it does give you more courage, I think, to stay true to your convictions, because you stop thinking about what's at stake for you and you are only thinking about what's at stake for them. And I think that actually makes very positive changes in how we do everything, really, but especially with how we manage landscapes and how we think about the wines that we're putting out into the world as well. Talk about the wines. Let's just if you just had the wines to point to as proof of concept, what have you noticed change in the wines since you've, been doing this for so many vintages now?
That's not what I've noticed. It's not what the consumers have noticed. And they find the wines to have more precision, more freshness. They have less acidity than in the past because of our cluster and the global warming. But our consumers find they have more freshness and they have more soul and energy. And it's something that comes back all the time about the energy of the wines and the soul. And I think it's when we started to hear that a few years ago, we knew what we were doing was working.
That's so great.
If you retransmit those soul energy and feelings you have in the vineyards, what we were speaking about a few minutes ago, and if the people consuming a bottle in Europe, in Asia, in the US can feel some of it, is that we made our job in part of it.
Yeah. And I think, we, as a winemaker, as a person who shepherd something along the way, we get very attached to our work. And I think that it is gratifying when that gets sort of validated in the outside world, when people sense and feel the energy changing in the wines and can notice without visiting the domain the changes that you've made in the vineyard. To me, that's all the proof you need, really. Because like you say, you made a lot of changes all at once. You didn't just change one thing, you changed everything. And for it to have gone so well, and I'm sure you had scary moments along the way, but to have stuck with it and now be feeling the reward of your hard work, I think that's really encouraging.
Yeah, when you forget those scary moments and moments of questions, they're way behind at the moment.
Yeah. Well, especially, it's kind of like having a baby, right? You don't remember all the terrible things about it. You just remember how wonderful the baby is, and that way you can have another one. So, yeah, no, I think we're supposed to forget the worst parts. Is there anything out there right now that you're looking to, in terms of like what you want to do going forward, or do you feel like you've really hit a zone and you don't want to change anything now?
No, we keep evolving. Now we've made the major changes, and I think all the rest will be adaptations and to be more precise. So we'll see. But the other big part we don't spoke much about, which is really key to it, I think, for me, is the human. And we speak about agriculture, the bands, but it's an all together. It's like a small world what we have. So I try to have a team who's very involved and who really lives the way we farm. And today, for example, I received a picture from one of my importer. He was in Burgundy and he was having lunch with a lot of my former teammates, people who stayed at Domaine for 2 or 3 years and have moved to take over some family vineyards, were here as interns. And they got all together for lunch and they sent me a picture. And those people who met here became friends. It has changed the way they live, the way they think about the way of farming. That's another aspect, which is really key to it. Not just about the development, but about becoming a community. Even ourselves and the people who are passing by, they change, so it will change the life of their family and their close friends as well. And it's bigger than us and just farming, and that's so satisfying. When you see this kind of picture, or when you get this kind of call, you're like, it feels really good and it feels right. A bit of payback with the reputation we have now, not just for us, but for the people with us, behind us, and very often in the shadow of ourselves. So it feels really good.
That's probably the best testament to the work that I can imagine, is when it starts changing people kind of in their heart and in their mind. And that makes a lasting change, I think. And that's really what we all should hope for. Where do you go for inspiration? Like what inspires you right now, and what helps keep you feeling motivated to continue to make little tweaks?
Honestly, many, many things. And we have the luck now with the reputation of Burgundy and the Domaine. Now we meet customers from over the world who do whatever job, have whatever passion. And I think that's what is really moving me now. It's meeting people who tell you about their business or their passion or their country, and the way they cook, the way they do that, or the way they create a fashion clothes. And that's what inspires me a lot now. There's some way of farming, but it's very much more in the way of living into some of the business or into some of the lifestyles or passions. And I love that to get to lunch, dinners, or tastings when I meet people and we talk about hundreds of things. And that has become one of my biggest inspiration at the moment, meeting people which I would have never crossed their path if I wouldn't produce wine in Burgundy nowadays. So
Yeah.
it's big luck.
It is a way of developing a community that's global and yet pretty intimate. I think wine really connects people. What do you think is the biggest advantage that we have as winemakers for being leaders? Like you say, what do you think it is about wine that makes it possible to set an example, even though it's such a small portion of what agriculture really is?
I don't know. I think there's a mythic thing to it because you have wine in the religion since ever. People consider it as an art when it's more craft, but there is this dimension of consideration. And for a lot of people, wine, the bottle of glass, has been part of a special, at least once, of a special moment of their life or has moved them. So we all have a special connection to wine, even if we're not producers. So nowadays, with the attention to wine, given to wine, more and more people are, and the new world, more people are living in special lives. So wine is something that touches you, that's coming from agriculture. And it's about too many things now. It's about simplicity, about agriculture, but it's at the same time about luxury, sometimes like what Burgundy has becoming. So it's fascinating. And there are some things, people, they are film producers. And when you see the attention and the emotion there when they talk about wines or the experience they add, people are becoming not naked, but in a way. And that's the magic of wine.
What is the most exciting wine that you've had recently? Like what have you had at home that really excited you or made you want to find out more about a producer?
Nowadays, I drink a lot of Italian wines and from Piedmont and Sicily, and because it's a country where there are people farming in a very different way since a long time. And I think I've been really moved recently by these wines.
Mm-hmm.
Some Piedmont by the Roagna estate was done things since a long time, and the wines are, every time we pull the cork, it's tremendous. And I love wines of Sicily as well. The other day we had a bottle of Rabato from Ariano Chipinti, who has been doing tremendous stuff as well. So I just can't wait to go and visit her. And I was lucky to meet her for the first time last summer in Belgium. And when we talked a bit, and her wines and herself have really moved me. So now I need at some point to go there and visit her.
Me too. I love her wines. She's very inspiring, and what an incredible spot. Well, Charles, it's really been so wonderful to reconnect with you. And I'd like for you to just, if there's anything that you wish that either I had asked, or if there's something that you wish that you could tell people or let people know about anything, if we've left anything out.
Covered it quite widely, but I would say if you really feel it and you want to do it, just go for it. It's an advice which has been given to me once, and it's the one that changed my life and my approach, and I have no regret from it. So if you feel it, go for it. There's always a way to get back. If it doesn't work, there's always a way.
Well, excellent parting words, Charles. Thank you so much for being with me today. And I really look forward to meeting you in person someday. We've done this a couple times on screens, and it would be really, really lovely to share a glass of wine with you someday.
We will do so with great pleasure, Mary. Thank you for having me on stage.
Thank you so much. So even though it makes it a little bit harder, you have to pay a little bit more attention, you have to agree with me that all of these accents are so charming and really adds to the diversity of listening in your ears. I really enjoyed that catching up with Charles, and I am glad I got to share that conversation with you. These practices, in whatever farming system we're talking about, are changing how people look at land. And that's why I think these conversations are so important, because we all hope for a better future, whether that be of wine, of vegetables, of seed, of everything. And we're all doing our best. And it's nice to hear from other people who are really shining a light and being pioneers in their own regions and in their own neighborhoods. So that's why I wanted to speak with Charles, and I really hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. I would again like to thank my co-hosts at the Market Garden podcast, Alex and Natalie, who are speaking with some really fascinating people this season. And also, I hope that you have, in the time away from us, been able to enjoy the other podcasts, including the Composter podcast, the No-Till Seed podcast, the Winter Growers podcast, the YouTube channel. I hope you've got your sweatshirts on, and it's quite an enterprise now. And I gotta hand it to Jesse and Jackson and Dr. Professor for keeping us all in line and doing the best work we can. Thanks to all of my friends at the No-Till family, and I'll see you kids next time.
All right, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Real quick, here are some things that we have going on. The YouTube channel is still rocking with loads of farm tours and technical videos put up over there over the last year. Just go to YouTube and search for No-Till Growers. We also have the No-Till Growers forum over at no-tillgrowers.com that you can visit and discuss all things no-till. So go check both of those things out. Also, here are a few places that you can find me this winter of 2023-2024, like the Acres Eco Ag Conference this week, just across the river from Cincinnati, the Utah Food and Farming Conference at the Red Acre Center in Utah. Of course, as always, I will be at the Organic Association of Kentucky conference called Oak, here like 15 minutes from my home farm. That's in January, and these are a bit out of order, but the Organic Growers School outside of Asheville, North Carolina, I will be there all week hanging out, so come on down, or up or over, I don't judge. There is also the 2024 Dallas Inner City Growers Symposium in Texas. Will be the last event I do in person before the season gets going in the spring. All the links for those in the show notes, and also linked in the show notes is our merch. Specifically, our hats are back on pre-order with the goal of getting them to you by the holidays. So snag one soon. If you enjoy our work, you can support it by picking up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook there at no-tillgrowers.com. Or you can join the hundreds of donors who support us through patreon.com/no-tillgrowers. That is the absolute lifeblood of our work, and at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs this week to Brian Newton, Tyler Rollins, Abraham, Hank Zecca, Chris Yates, Jill Crosby, Stephen Wilder, Closter Farm and Livestock Co., Rob Soma, Sean at All About the Garden, Joseph Sanguinetti, Danny Rodriguez, Alex Savatsky, PTHF, Steve Burr, Stephanie and Alex, Stephen Smith, Alberto Diaz, Jason Ruel, Scott Harris, Earth Care Farmer Jane Murner Cynical, Clement, Judson Taylor, Grown Up Farm, Bob and Ann Patton of Hexhamshire Organics, Jared Kirst at Rivendell Farms, Dan Brisebois, Steve Larson, Fiona and Donnie of Firefly Farm, and Jen Lawrence. Huge shout out to everyone who supports us in whatever way that you can. You all are amazing. Otherwise, thanks for listening. We'll catch you next week. Bye.